There was once a king who lived in a fine castle with his loving wife and daughter. He wore the finest clothes and ate the finest food. The vaults of the castle were filled with gold, silver, and exquisite jewels. It seemed he had everything, and yet he wasn't happy, because he knew one day all of this would come to an end, and this made him deeply unhappy and fearful. And so what he wanted more than anything in the world was to live forever. He made a proclamation that anyone who could bring him the secret of eternal life would be richly rewarded with their weight in gold every year for the rest of their life. Within hours, a queue of hopefuls over a mile long had formed outside the castle, each of them promising that they could deliver the king's wish for immortality. Physicians and dietitians, scientists and alchemists, holy men and con men, bringing with them a bewildering array of pills, potions, spells, incantations and contraptions. But on closer scrutiny, it became clear that none of these things could actually promise to deliver what the king yearned for. All of these things would serve only to prolong his life, and this wasn't good enough for the king, who wanted nothing less than to banish death itself from his castle. As the sun set on that long day, there came to the castle a wizened old man, bringing news that there was only one way to escape death and to achieve immortality, and that was to drink from the water of the fountain of eternity. And so the king rallied a great army, hundreds of soldiers whose sole purpose it would be to seek out this fountain of eternity and bring the water to him, that he may drink it and truly live forever. In the meantime, though, the king wasn't going to take any chances. He was determined that he would keep that rascal Death from his castle. So he gave orders for an enormous wall surrounding the castle to be built. Every builder across the land was to give up any project they were working on in order to join the wall building effort. And so the building began. Stone after stone after stone, higher and higher and higher. And when the quarries had been stripped of all their resources, but still more stone was needed, new quarries were carved out of the land. Ancient woodland, land for growing food, people's homes, all destroyed in an effort to create this impenetrable wall. The king became utterly obsessed in his quest for immortality, blind to the destruction happening all around him, deaf to the words of his wife as she tried to reason with him, and oblivious to the suffering he was causing to his subjects and to his family, especially his daughter, who missed talking and playing with her father. Her mother, the queen, seeing her daughter's sorrow, gave to her as a gift a little white rat as a pet, who soon became the princess's closest friend and confidant. And the days passed, and the months passed, and the wall continued to grow. But then one night, in spite of the king's efforts, death came to the castle. But not for him, the queen, the princess, or indeed any other human that dwelt there. Death came in the night for the princess's little white rat. The king, awakening to the sound of heart-rending sobs, for a moment he wants more than anything to go to his daughter and soothe her in her sorrow. But no. He stops himself and pushes these feelings away. Her crying over this rodent served only as a reminder of death and of the grief that must follow as surely as night follows day. This cannot be, he thought. There must be no grief, for if there is no grief, surely there can be no death. So that very day came another proclamation. From this day forth, no man, woman or child shall shed a tear for the passing of a loved one, or indeed any other cause of their sorrow. And just to be extra sure, the king ordered further building of the wall to make it even higher, eventually blocking out the light and plunging the castle into darkness and gloom, stifling any joy that remained within those walls. With all expressions of grief and sorrow banned, there was nowhere for people's tears to flow. So they held onto them, and over time the sky itself, as if in sympathy, it too held back its tears. Weeks passed, with no rain, the land caught in the dusty grip of a terrible drought. Crops that grew on what little land had not been destroyed began to wither and die. Food was scarce. And then came the sickness. A suffocating sickness that took away the breath, as if drowning in all those tears that had nowhere to go. Even the seemingly impenetrable wall of the castle could not keep the sickness away, as it struck down servants and courtiers, and even the queen. The king ordered the top physicians in the land to bring medicine to cure her, but his efforts were in vain, and the queen succumbed to the sickness. But just before she took her last breath, the king ordered for her body to be laid in a chest of ice, suspended in animation until a cure for the sickness could be found. "Ha! What do you think of that, Death?" he cried. "I will take back my beloved wife from your fiendish clutches. You will not get the better of me." A year and a day passed, until there came news of a cure for the sickness. The queen's body was lifted from the chest of ice, and 3 drops of the medicine placed upon her tongue. As they slipped down her throat, she gave a great gasp as her breath returned to her body. She stared at her husband, her eyes wide with confusion. With some effort, she rose from the bed and spoke. "Why did you do this to me?" And then she turned from him and walked away. As the days passed, she would neither see him nor speak to him. Endlessly she walked the corridors of the castle, present only in body, her spirit and all that she had been dwelling elsewhere. One day, the princess went to the king and pleaded with him. "Father, this is madness. But worse than that, this is cruel. I love my mother with all my heart, but I can't bear to see her like this. You have to let her go." He knew she was right. And later that day, he held his wife in his arms as she gently, peacefully, and gracefully slipped away from him forever. And now his grief was too much to bear. Rising up from within, he could no longer push it away. He ran to the top of the highest tower of the castle wall and looked out over the land that he had destroyed, now parched and scarred. He saw the devastation, he saw the suffering. He thought about his wife and his daughter and everything that he had lost. And then a single tear formed in the corner of his eye, rolled down his cheek and fell onto the dry and dusty ground below. Then came another and another as the king fell to his knees and wept. His tears formed a puddle where they fell upon the earth, and the puddle became a lake, and the lake became a river which flowed through the land, quenching and reviving all that it touched. And then, for the first time in months, it began to rain. Climbing down from his tower, the king started to walk, following the course of the river, and everywhere he went he saw life and colour restored to the land, green shoots bursting forth. He walked for many days and nights, until one day, in a clearing in a forest, he came across a fountain, and there stood the wizened old man. The old man scooped up water from the fountain into a cup and offered it to the king. "Your Majesty, now at last you have found the fountain of eternity. Will you take a drink?" The king takes the cup and pours the water onto the ground. And where the water lands, wild flowers of every colour appear. "I think, perhaps," said the king, "that I do not wish to live forever after all. So, are you ready to come with me now?" said the old man. "Yes, I believe I am." And with that, the king collapsed into the arms of death, for of course that is who the old man was. And death scooped him up as a loving parent might scoop up their child, and carried him off into eternity.